All right, welcome and good evening, everyone, or good morning, good noon, whenever, wherever you might be. Uh, Back with another AMA. It's been, I guess, a couple, 2, 3 months since we've done one of these, but we have back with us Cody Willard of TradingWithCody.com, hedge fund manager, founder of SKTLs Crypto. Any other titles or accolades I should throw in there?
Former walk-on University of New Mexico Lobos.
Okay, there you go.
Can't leave that out.
And we have, first time on the panel, Mr. Dan Geraci, chairman of the Planetary Society. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's good seeing you in the weekly Skittles, calls, volunteer meetings, and whatnot. But Dan spit so much knowledge in there. We had to bring him on to one of these because it's why keep it to ourselves?
Well, honestly, Dan and I. First of all, Dan and I have gotten to be, frankly, very good friends personally in the several months since we were connected by our mutual good friend Chris Meyer. Shout out Chris, Mr. Mudd. Actually, side note, Mudd put Dan Geraci in a couple of movies. Like, which ones? Something About Mary?
No, not that one.
Which two? Tell them.
Stuck on You and Heartbreak Kid are the ones that I was in.
So, at any rate, Dan's also a movie star. You guys might not realize that. But yeah, we met in Albuquerque and went to dinner and gotten to be really good friends anyway. And he's been coming to the Skittles meeting for a couple, 3 months probably. And we sort of let him run it when he will. I mean, because he's a fount of knowledge about the space industry generally. He also knows all kinds of things about all the startups in space. He has a network of, Wall Street to the space industry to DC that rivals no one. And on the calls, we sometimes are like, hey, Dan, can you just talk about space for 15 minutes? And then he does. And it's fascinating and everybody loves it. And the calls have been growing. We've decided, by the way, side note, that we're going to do the weekly Skittles calls. We do them every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. We're going to start doing them on YouTube. Does this same link work for those calls, or will we have to every week?
It'll be a new link per call. But yeah.
So stay tuned on Twitter. Follow us, SKTLS Crypto on Twitter, and we'll be posting the links weekly to join us on these calls, and you'll get to hear Dan sometimes just riff on space, which is a little bit what we're going to do tonight. Cabana, I totally hijacked. I'll do that all night. I'm sorry. Take it back.
It's quite all right. We have an hour to go. So, talk away. We have some chat activity so far. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat. Lenrock1433, Estelle Jackman, Space Rocks, Dow. So excited about this. Yes, well, we are too. So I guess, I'll go to you, Dan. What is, Cody spoke obviously highly of you there, but could you give us a quick background of yourself and what the Planetary Society is really?
Yeah. Well, I started out spending more than a few decades in the investment industry, actually, much of it in the asset management industry, running investment firms of different types. And so have a really good common denominator with Cody on the investment side of the house. But I've been a lifelong space nut, born a Sputnik baby, if you will, a few months before Sputnik went up, and always was fascinated with space. Joined the Planetary Society and been an active member for more than 30 years now. Been chairman of the board for, 17 of those years. It's a very powerful space interest group, a nonprofit, planetary.org, for those that want to take a look. We've got, about 50,000 members worldwide. We have a reach that extends to more than 2 million space enthusiasts. It was founded in 1980 by the famous astronomer and space educator Carl Sagan, and it is led today by Bill Nye the Science Guy. We do a lot of really cool stuff. We just ended a mission with our solar sail, the first of its kind to tack using sunlight. We have a very big commitment to STEM. We do a lot of public outreach, space policy, etc. So I encourage anybody who has any interest in space and who has kids in their life who like space to join the society and let the kids get access to a whole ton of stuff that we have coming for kids. Most importantly, it's about this future generation.
Excellent.
Dan, would you mention, sorry, but Cabana, Dan, would you mention the press release that went out the day that you joined the Planetary Society?
Well, Planetary Society's got a very esteemed board. And just ironically, as timing would have it, the day that I joined the board with Elon Musk, we both went on the board together. So I always laugh about the press release that went out from the society because it said, Planetary Society adds internet and investment experience. And, it's kind of interesting that back then Elon was just an internet guy coming off PayPal. So how things have changed. Had he
founded SpaceX when you guys joined, or was it?
No, but he was working on it on the board. And I remember the day he said, I'm going to have to resign from the board. I've got a couple of companies cooking that are taking a lot of my time. So little did we know.
Interesting.
Yeah. Long time ago.
Yeah, Space Rocks got a laugh out of that in the chat with the Elon thing there. Lots of questions starting to appear in the chat. So I have them all marked down here. We're going to get to them. Quick one, just kind of like a 10,000 or however many thousand feet atmospheric crypto overview, Cody, really quick. I know you've been bearish-ish on, say, just the general crypto space. You've pointed out before that the SKTLs chart is one of the best you've seen, and we can pull that up here in a second. But where I know you're pretty bearish. You're really bearish on Bitcoin, Ethereum. They could go down a lot from here. We've started the year off rather hot.
Yeah, you almost started putting words in my mouth there. So let me interject here and add a little color, even background for people who don't know me. I'm not like a crypto cynic or skeptic in general. I've been in Bitcoin, as Cabana has been reading me for more than 10 years, 15
probably a couple
years.
Decades now, really.
My stuff. I bought Bitcoin in 2013 and wrote all about it and explained to people how to get into it at $100. And I believe in the idea of a open, transparent currency, especially, crypto is a brilliant concept for it. Blockchain is great. There's 20,000 cryptos out there now, more than 20,000, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cryptos out there. Most of them are fraudulent, silly, or stupid. And that's what I've been saying for the last year and a half. About when Bitcoin went blow off topish, when the markets were through the roof, when everybody I knew was suddenly an innovation investor and believer in every crypto, and everybody's a crypto millionaire and got a crypto podcast. And no offense, Cabana, yours is actually great, man.
Thanks. You've been a guest as well. So.
Yes, I have. What a chart, SKTLs chart. So look, we created the SKTLs cryptocurrency. I wanted to learn more about where all these cryptos were coming from and why it was so easy to do it. It's not incredibly easy, but especially if you do it right. And we are one of two cryptocurrencies in the entire world that is not a security, Bitcoin being the other one. And maybe there's a few others, but we worked with our attorneys from the beginning to make sure we had no founders tokens. We got nothing in exchange. We literally gave away, we didn't get anybody's information, no sacrifices, nothing. We airdropped to whoever in the United States or Canada registered for the airdrop. Half the tokens went out to those people. Half of them went into a fund that will clean up space debris. And once a year, we donate 10% of those tokens to 5 entities that will then can sell the tokens, do whatever they want with them, where there's no restrictions on any of it. From the beginning, we've done this transparently and openly and given it away and letting the free markets do it. I personally have bought, a nominal amount of SKTLs tokens in the open market. I did get the airdrop. But, and other than that, it's most of these are in the thousands of people's hands out there, some of whom sell it and feed their kids, buy McDonald's, go to the grocery store with the proceeds they got. The airdrop was worth anywhere from, if you sold it the first day, $300 or so, to people have sold it for $3,000 at the top.
How many coins were there? Like 30 some thousand, right?
Yeah, everyone got about 35,000, 36,000 tokens on the airdrop. So look, the fund exists and we're excited to have it, but I'm still pretty bearish on most all cryptocurrencies. Dan, you were about to say something?
No, I was just going to say there's a segue there about the purpose of SKTLs, because there's a question in the chat about how big an issue space trash is today and the whole the orbital debris issue and the purpose of SKTLs specifically.
That's right. Oh, I didn't know we could see the chat. That's cool. The comments. All right.
Yeah, I have them queued up. There's plenty coming. So
well, and I see that I saw that you were putting them on the bottom of the screen, but there's a whole thing of chat there. Look, yeah, but let's hit on that real quick. I think Cabana wanted me to just sort of hit on cryptos. Look, I still love Bitcoin. I still own it personally. I still have some in the hedge fund, and I, like long term, I'm still a big believer. But I do think we're still got tens of thousands of cryptocurrencies that are going to get washed out this year. Most of them are going to outright zero. Most of them will be worth, tens of thousands of dollars instead of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Ethereum, I think, is just got the gas fees are way too high, and it needs to have a complete reset of its pricing just to make it fundamentally on a trajectory of critical mass that can grow, and then it can get back to a more healthy, sustained level. But I still like the concept of Ethereum just fine. I'm still a believer and owner of Bitcoin, and also of SKTLs tokens. I have a lot more Bitcoin than I do money in Bitcoin than I do SKTL tokens, because Bitcoin's gone up so much since I bought it the first time.
And I'm more of a fan of Ethereum than Bitcoin, but that is another debate for another show. We always say this every show. So here we go. Let's get back to that question, shall we? That Dan touched on. And we have plenty in the chat. And don't worry, I'm marking them all, and we're going to answer them all. So Lenrock1433 asks, how big of an issue is space trash / debris today versus 5 years from now? So forward looking.
Interesting phrasing of the question. It's the single biggest impediment to the space revolution, the single biggest potential impediment to the space revolution. And other than that, I'm going to let the expert give context and color on this.
Well, it's a problem now. And as Cody said, it's an impediment to the development of LEO, low Earth orbit, the LEO economy, which is where all of this activity in space is going to happen as a first wave, before we get out any further to lunar or Mars, for that matter, all of which are operating in parallel today. But there are roughly a million and a quarter pieces of debris larger than a couple of inches floating around in a pretty defined orbit around the Earth. It may not seem like much if it's a couple of inches, but keep in mind that all of those pieces are traveling at just under 18,000 miles an hour. So when
a bullet travels 8,000 miles an hour.
So you get hit by one of those, or your spacecraft gets hit by one, it goes right through it. It just punches a hole. There was one that hit the arm of the International Space Station, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, and it put a really nice hole right through it. If that had gone through the station itself, they would have had a near catastrophic emergency, because a hole that size could vent the station pretty quickly. So they would have had to have patched it rather quickly as well. So debris is an issue. You have dead satellites. There are tons of debris falling to the Earth every day in different pieces, from old spacecraft, satellites, etc., that are up there, Every satellite that goes up on a rocket. The upper stage of that rocket that carries it ends up staying up there for the most part. And even though it seems like a lot, space is really big. So there's a lot of room between things. And like the grooves on an old vinyl record, for those of you old enough to remember those, certain pieces of debris will sweep through and pick up a lot. The space station's orbit has been pretty well cleared out of debris. But 5 years from now, we're hoping that it's going to become less, because there's a huge initiative going on right now to start to clean it up. And that's a whole big issue. Yep.
Let's go back. Let's go to the cleanup stuff in a minute, because it truly is, germane to the SKTLs mission itself and whatnot. But two things. How did they clean up the space debris around the space station orbit?
It wasn't necessarily cleaned. If you go way back, there wasn't as much in orbit to begin with. And when you go back to when the station was put up 20 plus years ago, the amount of private satellites up there was mostly the domain of the large telecommunication satellites, which are at a much higher orbit than the space station. The space station's about 250 miles up. Those big geosynchronous satellites are 25,000 miles out, 10% of the way to the moon. And so they had selected an orbit that was relatively clean. It's a good orbit for the space station. There is debris that will move because it's not zero gravity in Earth orbit. It's microgravity in Earth orbit. So things will start to slide down toward the Earth over time as their orbits degrade. But things have been cleaned up by other things being away and getting deflected. That's just natural. That's how planets form. That's exactly how planets form around the sun. So at the end of the day, the real estate we want to occupy with future development in orbit is loaded with junk. And you've heard about Russians or the Chinese blowing up satellites in the last couple of pieces of debris.
Dan, you froze.
Yeah, we might be losing you a little bit, Dan. Go ahead, Cody.
Well, unfortunately, I want Dan in HD to answer this question.
H Dan.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Def Dan. The question was about 5 years from now. Yep. And if you would, even another question I want to sort of leverage off of that one is it, if we don't solve space debris, or if there were an act of, oh no,
he'll be back.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right.
Yeah,
there you are. So if the Russians or the Chinese or the Iranians or someone decides they want to blow up a bunch of satellites, could the space debris problem get bad enough eventually that we would not even be able to go to the moon anymore? We wouldn't be able to send any new satellites up at all, because it'd even be impeding our view of outer space eventually. I mean, how bad could the space debris crisis get 20 years from now?
We launch through the debris now. We know where it is. There are large gaps. This isn't like we're driving through a junkyard. There's plenty of room. Frankly, if somebody up there, wanted to blow everything up, our biggest problem would not be we can't get to the moon. It would be we're using rotary dial phones again if we lose our telecommunications capabilities. So, and that's a very real threat. In space, on orbit warfare is advancing at a pretty rapid rate. And there's a lot going on today, according to Space Force, that it gives a lot of pause for concern. We saw what happened in the Ukraine, and then thanks to Elon, he set Starlink up and reconnected the country to the internet. So it is a loser's game to start breaking stuff up and creating a mess, because the same debris can impact an adversary's own assets in space.
But if you're Iran, the risk benefit of blowing up a couple of your crappy satellites that are up there versus taking out a bunch of American satellites, it's an attractive, unfortunately, an attractive risk benefit. And that's one of the reasons that, and I've been writing a lot about this, Dan, that the U.S. government recognizes the incredibly accelerating importance of space as a defense, a national defense platform. And they always have with Star Wars and everything else. But right now, even as private investments in most startups, certainly in crypto world, and most high tech, innovation, if you're not AI, you can't get funding unless you're space. And then there is a lot of funding from the government going into the private market, going into funds that are funding the private market. And there's, I think, even the VCs, Dan, you and I were talking this morning about, there's a lot of VCs that have a space angle and are investigating and or actively investing in companies like SpaceX, for example, which, full disclosure, my hedge fund, I'm an investor in SpaceX and a couple other companies we'll probably mention today. Dan, but quick, Cabana, will you pull up that question? That was a great question. Ari, not dumb at all. Not silly at all. Great question. Please, Dan, would you? Or
I guess
Cabana,
Dan started to touch on it. How do we know, for those maybe not watching and could be listening perhaps on YouTube Premium, how do we know where all of this space debris is? I guess, is there a map or something? How do we know when there is new debris as well?
There are maps. You can Google it and it will blow your mind, because it looks like a million little pinpricks of white in orbit around the Earth. This is done with tracking capability from the ground, very sensitive orbital tracking systems using various types of tracking stations. And we have a very clear map of every bit of degree down to an inch or so.
Wow.
That's in orbit. And so if somebody creates more, we can detect it right away. And there are actually startups in the space domain who have tracking software, and they all claim that theirs is better. It's real time. It can give you more data about the debris, but we know all this. Getting it is a whole other issue. And one of the impediments to that is that people have always said, deorbit the debris. Take a dead satellite and push it toward the Earth, let it get caught up in the atmosphere, and it'll burn up, and it's gone. In the last couple of years, we've realized that when you burn aluminum, and 85% of the satellites, or 85% of it is aluminum, that has a bad interaction with the ozone in the atmosphere and depletes the issue of how do you repurpose and do things with debris has become a major focal point and a huge source, which is the Space Force, to try to get small companies to develop solutions right now. With a
Cabana, who can vouch for the fact that
Orbital Prime,
that Dan has never been glitchy on a single
This is true.
SKTLs weekly volunteers call. And he's glitched out twice there. You're back, Dan. A minute ago, you went HD for a minute.
Yeah.
You know what it is?
Yeah.
He's in a residential neighborhood, and at 4 p.m. Eastern, everybody in that neighborhood,
all the kids are home playing video games.
7 p.m. Eastern, they're all playing video games. The kids are playing video games. And people are doing
everybody's into dinner.
Netflix. And anyway, Dan, we heard 99% of what you said there, but you did break up a little bit. Cabana, are there other topics?
Yeah, there's
fixed topics that we wanted to get to before we sort of just start taking some Q&A.
There's plenty of
on Twitter a couple of topics.
Thank you. I mean, there's plenty here. So I
Let me
guess
just see what I promised I would hit on and make
Yeah.
sure we don't just.
we covered the mission of SKTLs, right?
Yeah, no. We said we got Dan Geraci. We're going to talk about space debris, the future
Space
of
news.
space, latest space news. Dan, you want to just talk a little bit about space news? Would you riff like we always like when you do on the SKTLs
Well,
call?
there's an interesting thing with investing in space that centers around the fact that there's not a lot of expertise in how to due diligence these companies from the bad one. And there's a lot of this new space that a lot of investors of the .com bubble, and it really has to do with you analyze the space company when the investment horizon has to be very long term, 8, 10, 12 years for a lot of this, versus typical ventures. Venture capital manages the portfolio with a stopwatch returns. And so the companies right now, look at the news, people say that economy are going to do okay. The one difference with space versus the internet or any other industry is there's a permanent buyer who is non-cyclical, and that's the United States government, the Department of Defense, the Space Force more specifically. They are out for investment in companies all day long. They want the technology. They need the technology. The space race is, and it's only heating up. So these companies that are startups in the space economy are building things for both a commercial business that's viable for them in the future, but their likely first customer may be the US government. And so you look at the news today, and you look at SpaceX doing the first Space Force launch of 2023 today. SpaceX has the contract to launch all of Space Force's new satellites. Rocket Lab talked today about the military being a big buyer for their Neutron rocket that's coming in 24. So the government has made it clear, including NASA, they're going to buy all their stuff from the private sector. So being an investor in a space company means you are playing a dual use business model. The likelihood that they have a commercially viable market for their product, and the bonus being that the US government could be a buyer as well.
Let me riff on that a little bit, Dan. The fact is that you've got, right. The government present day is this baseline, probably half of the investment market in space, I might even guess. I mean, I don't know what the numbers would be, but and where you bifurcate whether it's actually a space investment versus a national defense asset gets to be cloudy too. But look, there's a lot of government investment and recognition to create a platform. Dan and I we had a presentation from the Space Force a few weeks ago that talked about them setting the platform for commercial space to be built on top of. And what I look near term, in 5 or 10 years, the government defense is a large part of it. Satellite communications and observing Earth and figuring out how to get better crop yields and feed children and make the world a better, safer, more abundant place is happening over that next 5 or 10 years. 20 years from now, we're going to be regularly seeing people travel back and forth to Mars. You're going to see people, blue collar workers, spend months up at a factory working on various semiconductor or chemical products or various who knows what up in these factories that are going to be in orbit at zero gravity with vacuum and no particles other than the space debris, but no dust particles getting into the junk and messing things up. We're like, You watch a Star Wars movie, and as an economics major, hedge fund guy, I can't watch even sci-fi movies, Avatar yesterday, without thinking of the incredible amount of investment and wealth that was generated creating the technologies that say, like even in Wakanda Forever, the whole thing is partly about the wealth, the economy that gets created in this hidden economy in Africa by the energy and the application, free energy and the applications of this material and the free energy that can come from this. This is what's going to happen. The other thing I want to mention here is we're losing Dan again, at least for a moment, is that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when the smartphone came out, I recognized that it was an incredible platform and that it would be, I wrote about this endlessly and invested in Apple and Google and Facebook and all kinds of applications for the smartphone, because I recognized that we'd have billions of people using it trillions of times a day with hundreds of trillions of hours wasted on it, and or actually you like doing something productive on it. But that's what I feel like about space. I'm not smart enough to figure out like that. I didn't know that people would track their dogs with an app, or I could find out my wife is traveling on the road and I know where she is when she's coming back from Albuquerque with a Maris or something. But I knew that genius, smart people were going to leverage the platform that was being built, and there would be trillions of dollars of economic productivity and market cap, as a hedge fund manager is what I care about, going to be created. As a citizen, I care about the fact that we're going to feed more children and things. I mean, then truly that's what space is about. It is about making the world a better, safer, better place. But as that happens, it's going to create trillions of dollars of activity. And you just got to get your bucket out around the activity that's about to be accelerated. So near term, it's government. 10 or 20, 30 years, the government will be 10% of the space economy rather than 60 or 70 or whatever percent it is today.
Well, I mean, you can see the entire pie grow as well at the same time. I think it's going to be definitely a bigger piece for commercial. Everything the government's doing is to drive commercial. There's a program called Space Prime under SpaceWorks. And Space Prime is to prime private industries. And that's what it's for. And the first one in that series is called Orbital Prime, as I mentioned. And it asked for submissions from private companies, mostly startups, for space debris to develop technology that would do one of three things: identify the debris, approach and retrieve the debris, and then dispose of it, do something with it, bring it somewhere. And there were some 400 plus submissions. 98 companies won federal grants. 98 companies won 135-ish federal grants and are well underway and into their second year now of developing those technologies that were selected by Space Force as having promise that they wanted to see developed. And there will be others. But this whole issue of priming the commercial market is all about building the capital market. The government understands that our biggest competitive advantage over China, for example, because that's our greatest competitor and adversary in the space domain, is the private market system of the US. The incentives and the capital markets and the entrepreneurial nature, which does not exist there. That's our secret sauce. That's our secret weapon, is the minds and the innovators who are coming up with this stuff. The problem is the government can't get their hands on it fast enough. Most people don't know what's going on in space. They don't understand this new economy. Read Space News. Just take a look at it every morning, spacenews.com, and you'll be blown away by how much is going on in the space sector.
Dan, you should also mention the SKTLs, SKTLS.com newsletter. It has great, Piper shout out. Piper does a great job. gathering news. He also does an investment, a space investment version of it occasionally. Go back to the homepage if you would there and scroll down though, Cabana. There's a place to show them where they can just, on the homepage, you just scroll down a little bit and you could sign up for the newsletter right there. Subscribe.
Yeah.
So,
highly recommend that.
yeah, I don't know. It's incredibly exciting. Let's take some Q&A. We've run 35 minutes into this, and Dan mentioned when Dan asked me how long it would run, I told him I think it'll run about an hour. But if we really start riffing on space, we might run long. And he goes, they might have to shut us up, and that might be the case. Give Dan another question while we got him in HD. While we got HD Dan.
I think I solved the problem.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, you've been looking and sounded good for a while now, so I think
all right, good.
Hopefully we got it. Let's see here. A Dan question. So here we go. I'll ask the first question. What is Kessler syndrome? Because Space Rocks Dow asks, have we developed tech enough to stop Kessler syndrome?
Well, I'm going to Google it because I don't want to say something wrong. Okay. Yeah, this notion of the more space junk there is, the more space junk is created, and it builds on itself because you have collisions and you have smaller pieces. And I think the only way to stem Kessler syndrome is going to be simply to start reversing the trend. And there's a couple ways to do it. One of them is going to be the active removal of debris, which is going to be something that's going to involve spacecraft that can grasp and remove debris, bring it to a location to be disposed of, either stored in a large upper stage rocket that's just sitting up there empty. There's a brilliant young company called Cislunar Industries that has developed a foundry that will take cut strips of aluminum, melt them down in orbit, and produce aluminum rods and ingots. And even now they're experimenting with casting them into other components to be used for manufacturing in orbit, because that's the next big phase, is on orbit manufacturing. So the recycling, think junkyards, think recycling centers in orbit. That is a major industry that's being developed as we speak. So you reduce the amount of debris. And the other part is people not creating it in the first place. And there are a number of companies who are in the business of providing end-of-life services for satellites, where they have a spacecraft that can go up and grab a dead satellite and go ahead and dispose of it properly by bringing it someplace and getting it out of that orbit. That will in turn drive down the insurance cost, the liability insurance for those satellites, because if you have an end-of-life contract for your satellite with an insurance company, your premiums will be less because the liability won't be there of you crashing into somebody else's satellite. It's kind of like LoJack, in terms of getting you that discount on your insurance. So there are a number of ways to reduce it. There are international treaties that are being pushed. Some countries don't want to sign it. The government will not pay for cleanup.
Okay, so let's get to that. That's where the Skyttle Space Debris Token is part of it, right? That there is, in economics, there's a concept called tragedy of the commons. And tragedy of the commons means that if everybody is sharing a park with their dog, there is no incentive for anybody to clean up the poop because everybody thinks the other guy is going to clean up the poop. And if one guy doesn't clean up the poop, then you got a mess. And that's space debris. And you can't incentivize something to clean up stuff unless there's an economic benefit from it. And until they can figure out how to utilize space debris for something like, say, Cislunar, by the way, shout out Gary Kalman, CEO of Cislunar, was on a couple of Skyttle space calls, gave us a presentation maybe 3 or 4 months ago. The idea that there is no economic motive to do anything about it is why was like, hey, if we're going to create a cryptocurrency, let's do something cool. Well, space is what I love, and I think it obviously you guys are my passion. I think we're going to have tens of trillions of dollars economic benefits and solving world hunger, almost making world peace almost out of space. In order to do that, we've got to clean up the space debris problem. The government doesn't want to do it. The other way we can do this stuff is to tax people and then use those funds to pay people to go clean up the park, or in this case,
and for those who aren't familiar with it, the reason the governments won't do it is a bigger liability. It's a geopolitical risk. Imagine if the U.S. said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and clean up the space debris. No matter whose it is, we're going to just go do the right thing. The notion of the U.S. just happening to pick up a Chinese satellite and, gee, what happened to it? Oh, yeah, sure, we took it apart or we brought it back down.
We were just solving the space debris problem, guys.
Yeah, that is a reason why the Space Force has come out and said, we're not going to spend a nickel, but we're going to put up this orbital prime initiative to get private sector companies. The biggest issue, as Cody said, there is no business case today that makes orbital debris cleanup a viable business. And in discussions with players like Lockheed, the first thing they say is when someone comes up with a solution that is commercially viable and we can make a business out of it, then we'll be all over it. But no one's done it. So this
as I started figuring out how these tens of thousands of mostly silly, stupid, and fraudulent cryptocurrencies were being built, I obviously dug into the DAO concept, the decentralized autonomous organization, and a new way of organizing human beings and energy force of human beings. You have normally governments or corporations or charities or a church or some sort of club, but you've never had this decentralized autonomous organization where people who are part of the community and have some sort of token in this community can then engage with the community and have vote power, other kinds of economic power, perhaps, whatever. But that decentralized autonomous organization can say, hey, so my friend, actually, Zach Daddy Cash, shout out Zach, said, why don't you do a space debris crypto? And I said, that's it, man. And so we figured out, look, if we create this token there, we truly give away all of them to the people who register and or to the fund. And then every time what happens? Every time there's a satellite or a human being or something sent to orbit, there's more risk of more space debris. So why don't we make that the printing part? That's how people can print new money. That's how they'll mine more tokens. The SKTLs tokens get mined whenever there is a successful space launch. So when a new satellite gets launched, minimal amount of tokens gets printed. When a human being gets sent into space, a more meaningful amount. When a human being gets sent to the moon, if and when that happens in the next year or two, a meaningful amount. If and when a human being gets sent out of the solar system, the maximum amount will be printed.
Hopefully
the
that's
numbers get cut in half every year. So it's deflationary. What'd you say, Dan? I missed the.
Said hopefully that'll be on purpose when someone leaves the solar system.
That's right.
I think the important thing
sometimes, but that's a different topic for another day.
It's
when I make jokes like that she wants me to leave. By the way, so look, yeah, but where was I? Mentioned my wife.
It's all about
token rewards.
The token rewards. So we mine more tokens whenever there are space actions. It is capped. To answer your question, Estelle, it is capped. We printed 100 million tokens for the early people who registered for the airdrop for free. We printed 100 million tokens for the fund that is dedicated to cleaning up space debris. And every time we mine more tokens for a successful space action, half of it goes to the people who own tokens on a pro rata basis, and half of it goes to that fund. Once a year, we donate 10% of the fund. If you donate 10% forever, you actually can do it forever. You never run out. The tokens at this very moment, if we were to reward them, would you pull up the SKTLs token again chart again, Cabana?
Sure.
At 1.8 cents or 2 cents, rounding it here, rounded up 10%. At 2 cents, the SKTLs token, there's 100 something million tokens in that fund. 10% would be donated. Let's call it 11 million tokens. 11 million times 2 cents is $220,000. So there's 5 entities that are going to get $40,000 to $50,000 of value that they can then they could sell it and go pay an employee, and that employee is working on that space debris cleaning idea. It could be a student who has this great idea to send up magnets through a cylindrical forest that he developed in his backyard using anti-gravity. I don't know. And we give him the $40,000 worth of SKTL tokens he can sell it, take the $40,000 and buy the platinum accelerator carbon thing that he has to put together to get it to the magnets to outer space to get well, it's not going to work on the aluminum, but you get what I'm going with.
It's a lot of money for a startup.
So and even a company that's out there raising several $100,000, man, this is a 10% addition to it right there. So if the token's at 20 cents, we're talking $400,000 for each of these 5 entities. If you're a space enthusiast, this is where the genius of the DAO comes together. We marry profit motive of crypto enthusiasts with people who love space and want to do a good that there is without this, there's no solution. So, hey, let's try to have a profit motive for people who believe in space and want to clean up space debris and do good for everybody all at the same time. So,
and I think, Cody, if you go to the bigger picture too for crypto, I personally believe crypto will likely evolve to become the off-planet currency for all activity that's going to take place off-planet, because there are going to be every business on Earth, and this has been written up in a number of places, and it's widely agreed, and Harvard just did a big business review report, but every company is going to have a space strategy, because everything on Earth is going to be taken off the planet to go develop economies in space. Big pharma is going to create drugs in orbit because you can build better molecules in a near weightless environment than you can on Earth. You're going to see entertainment in low Earth orbit as amongst the first.
Gravity-less basketball, man. I can't wait to watch it's a 100-foot rim, and you got to fly through the air,
anything
vacuum
that people will spend money for. But the more serious industries, ag tech is one. If anyone isn't familiar, we're developing now. There are companies developing hardened seeds to be able to grow crops in a weightless environment, in a stark environment on the surface of Mars or the moon. And that same technology is being transferred to develop crops in arid places like the desert. This work is being done in the Middle East right now with U.S. investment and Middle Eastern sovereign investment. Ag tech is a big one. There's going to be a commodities exchange for lunar and orbital type resources and Mars. Okay, oxygen, water, all the metals, creating steel. Aluminum will be a big off-planet commodity, and there will be a commodities exchange off-planet. So crypto is going to have a role, but if you can't imagine what a space economy is, just take what we have on Earth and put it up there. Unfortunately, the problems we have on Earth are going to follow the geopolitical issues.
Dan, on that note, Cabana, pull that Space Rocks comment. That's Elon himself, who is, the one who's, say, the fountainhead of the Mars movement, it has mentioned that there will be a cryptocurrency on Mars, and as I've said, like or on the SKTLs website, it says it. I'm quoting it, that if they're going to do a cryptocurrency on Mars, it might as well be a virtuous one that's helping you get there. And instead of, say, a Bitcoin or a Dogecoin or something that's just random. And, you know, there's all, I mentioned earlier, there's all the reason in the world I believe in Bitcoin, but for there to actually be a good happening and ongoing good of cleaning up space debris because your currency has value on Mars would be a really cool thing. This question frames it well. It's interesting. I've not pondered in quite this frame that how, if SpaceX is developing the community, the first community on Mars, but we're doing it under the banner of the United States, because we're obviously, the United States is paying for SpaceX's existence, and not just by funding and paying and hiring it to do launches, but the entire framework of having a corporation that is protected from outside forces is like happening in the United States. That's why brilliant people like Elon come here and not China. And so that it is a United States corporation that will reach Mars and establish that community first. So the Constitution of the United States would apply theoretically. Dan's nodding, I think. Yeah. But at the same time, Dan, let me just finish this thought that I think you would organize the community itself as a decentralized autonomous organization, that everybody there has their own value to the system, and it won't be a common, like it won't be communal, but it won't be go ahead, Dan.
No, I think this is a tricky one, and if you've ever read, and I have a lot of very, what's called hard science fiction, not fantasy stuff, but exploring the notion of communities and social structures on another planet, where people are mixed from different parts.
Lord of the Flies.
The reality is, in the beginning, it's governments or it's corporations. Those are going to be the two players that are going to go to that are going to go to Mars. It's either going to be a national government that lands there,
Dan,
or it's going to be.
Explain this, and this is what you're getting at. Let's get down to the minutia just a little for a second. That if you're a private citizen, and I want to take Amaris, my daughter, who doesn't walk or talk, and to Mars someday, because the gravity would be so much less that she would be able to easily hop around and talk and walk, if not talk, with technology that would be enabling that then too. And she's not going to work for SpaceX. So, right. And so, and then there will be people themselves that will want to go to Mars and open a storefront for the people on Mars to buy Snickers, and they will pay, by the way, using SKTL tokens to buy that Mars bar on Mars.
Yeah, it's an economy. It's an enclosed economy. But
not the Milky Way.
There you go. See, the Mars family. If you go to Mars, if you take the model with you, it's going to be about survival. The first people that go are going to be about setting up a place to live and figuring out how to survive. And there will be amenities, and most of those will be provided because most of those people are going to be in the employ of whoever sent them, a government or a company. There will be partners. So Caterpillar Tractor, that's who's going to be pushing around Mars regolith, dirt on Mars. It's going to be companies like that are going to go up, mining companies, engineering companies. And their people will be going. Kind of the frontiers people are going to be there first, the really hard scrabble type people. And over time, and it's going to take time, and Elon has said he wants to put 1 million people on Mars, you're going to have these self-sustaining, environments where private enterprise is going to be allowed to flourish. And the rights will be sold for, gee, is it going to be Coke or Pepsi that's going to buy the rights? I mean,
in the same way at the supermarket that Kellogg's buys the right for the eye level row, and the
end cap of the aisle
gets the bottom level.
No, but Coke and Pepsi are looking at this. Hilton just did a deal with Voyager to design the living quarters on the space station they're building for NASA. You're going to see companies vying to be the first, to have the right to be the first, to put their brand. Everybody wants their brand there. And there are 77 space agencies in this country. Most people don't realize that. 77, with another 28 coming on stream in the next 2 years. And as one person told me, and I won't name the country, but they all want to get into space. This is going to be, every country is going to have a space strategy. And the quote was, the king just wants to see the emblem of the country on something in space, because it's a source of national pride. The way the Apollo program was for us, it will be for every country. So don't think this is something that's going to happen and maybe you'll pay attention. You're not going to have a choice to pay attention to this in the next 5 years. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be everywhere.
Sorry, I made you echo.
Space crops are good, says Space Rocks. But so is anti-gravity basketball. We need it all. I agree.
Yeah, the three-pointer that never comes down.
I can't talk about basketball without wanting to dribble one, man.
No.
I want to see some MMA
on my show at Fox. My show was at the Bull and Bear Bar in the Waldorf Astoria. Very, classy, dressed up, highfalutin place. And I used to be able to. I had a basketball, and during my segments, I had a segment by myself. I'd be doing something, and I could talk, and I'd be spinning the ball and do tricks and jump on the stool. But I'd always be using my basketball. It was just sort of. It got to be, when I was doing the show, it got to be part of my, at least once a day. I needed that. And then one day, I finished the segment, and I was supposed to throw the ball over to the producer that I, like I'd done a million times. But my new co-anchor, Eric Bowling, no, I won't say any names, reached out and hit the ball. It goes into some glasses behind the bar, clank, clank, kind of breaking everywhere. Oh, man. And my basketball got banned. The point of the story is that my basketball got banned, and I don't have anybody to ban a basketball. I don't have one here near right now. It's probably back there in the house.
Someone will come downstairs and yell at you if you break something.
There you go.
On the bottom floor.
Hey, while we have Dan here, we have a couple more space-related questions. There are some crypto-related questions. I'll save those towards the end. Lenrock asks, we just talked about this, but I guess how far away is it before we have humans living on Mars, not just going to Mars, but living?
It's a loaded question because there's really two sides to it. I think what people need to realize is what we define as living. Hey, here's my place, and I'm going to grab a bite later, and that's going to be a long time. That may
50 years. 50.
I think it's going to be in the 25 to 35 range.
Oh wow, that's quicker than
because you have a private player in Elon moving not at the pace of government.
Dan, I write about Kurzweilian speed of time, and it's faster than the internet. I used to always be like, hey, we're moving in internet time, and then I read Kurzweil's The Singularity is Near, and he talks about how we advance quickly on the innovations, and we stand on the shoulders of giants is what he's riffing on, and that concept that it gets faster and faster. Now money moves instantaneously, information moves instantaneously. Everything moves faster and faster. It's not just internet time, it's Kurzweilian. And so things will be faster than you and I think over there, Cabana. We shouldn't be surprised. 30 years.
No, but you know what, though? I mean, we wasted 50 years since we left the moon, okay, playing around in low Earth orbit, never leaving our backyard. Where would we be today if we had the guts and it wasn't just unfortunately, the Apollo program was a Cold War strategy. It wasn't to go explore space. And that's why it stopped. But at the end of the day, people going to Mars, and we have to understand this, these are going to be one-way tickets. This isn't going to be, I'm going to go up there and do some work for 6 months and come back. When you go to Mars, it's a one-way trip. And that's how you colonize a place. This is going to happen with the moon in a much.
But Dan, let's walk through that a little bit. Walk through your timeline. If you're talking 20 or 30 years, eventually there will, I'm picturing in 20, 30 years going and visiting for 2 years. Spend 6 months to get there, visit for 2 years, spend 6 months coming back.
Yeah, but that's the living there piece versus yes, we will have people there sooner, starting with the first trip.
How long do you think before Elon's got people actually, it's just the very first trip, there's people on their way to Mars? Are we 5 years or less?
I think if he's really aggressive and there are no issues with Starship being able to get there, it could be the end of the decade for a human mission, whether they land, whether they circle, whatever they do. But it is not easy. Mars is a whole other ball game than the moon. I mean, the moon is just a 3-day trip. It's 250,000 miles away. It's no big deal. And 60 million kilometers is a whole other kettle of fish. And there's no way to repair
it. That puts it in perspective, doesn't it, Cabana?
There's no rescue.
Big deal.
That we laugh at the absurdity of him saying, yeah, going the moon's no big deal, and we haven't done it in 50 years. Nobody's done it in 50 years. If they did it at all, that's a topic for another day.
Our rovers have done a great job. I mean, that's American.
Hey, did we make it to the moon? Did we really get to the moon, Dan?
Huh?
Did we really get to the moon? That's not fake footage.
Oh, no, let's not go there. Oh, God.
Oh, boy.
I love poking that button. I was at a space investment conference, and Dan was in the crowd here, and I was on a panel, and I had somebody over there and said something. And at one point, I worked it in just like I just did right now. I was like, yeah, if we actually did go to the moon, I don't know if that footage is real. And everybody in that room, like they all let out a moan. Oh, man. It's like it's sacred. You can't, it's sacrilegious to say that in a space room.
I had the honor of spending some time with Buzz Aldrin at a dinner. And when he starts talking about it, it was real. Not that it should even be questioned, but you really can tell.
I got to interview over remote Buzz Aldrin one time, and it's one of those things. My wife tells me, I just redecorated, and set up my office. You guys might notice I have a new background and stuff for my calls and everything. And she was like, if you were smart when you were on TV, you would have gotten a signature, like a photo, postcard, like a book at least of everybody who's ever came on your show. And I've got like Burt Reynolds and Lonnie Anderson signed autograph pictures together framed. I've got the Harlem Globetrotter jersey signed by Curly and a couple of the other legends framed. But for the most part, I got nothing. I should have like a microphone from LL Cool J or some shit. Like I'm like great friends with Bob Weir. Do I have my guitar signed? No. Why don't I ask Bob to sign a freaking guitar sometime?
Well, there you go.
Idiot.
What else do we have for a question?
We have one more space question that doesn't necessarily have to do with crypto from Lenrock 1433. We've kind of talked about this a bit, but maybe you could expand a little more. What role has private investment played in the advancements of new space post NASA?
Yeah, well, new space as opposed to old space, which is NASA, those days when it was all government funded. New space is almost entirely funded by private investment. SpaceX, when you look at the 900-pound gorilla, they got a $500 million grant from the government to jumpstart it because the government didn't have any way to get to the International Space Station and needed a ride. and they delivered a man-rated spacecraft pretty quickly. Boeing, had a lot of issues getting there. The contractors are just not built for private space yet, like Boeing and Lockheed. And so it's all been private money. A lot of entrepreneurs who decided they wanted to get in, the kind of the junior varsity of the Musks and the Bezos and the Paul Allens and the Richard Bransons. There's a big cliff down to the next group who have started companies, who have raised capital. Many of them have started their own venture funds to kind of spread the risk around a little bit by owning pieces of other companies at the same time. And it's really been private capital. A lot of them have used government grants, small ones, to start their companies, 150 grand, 500 grand here and there to develop their technology. And that'll be the foundation piece for what we see as the new space economy. There are thousands and thousands of companies today in this new space economy. There's 1,000 or so popping up every year, and they're all over the country. There is no place. There's big space hubs around the country.
Dan, put that in perspective. Are there thousands of startup space companies in Europe? Are there thousands of startup space companies in China? Are there thousands of space companies starting anywhere? New Zealand has some space private.
New Zealand has a few. There are a few in Australia of any note. Europe depends on the country. Italy has a tremendous new space economy growing, a lot of privately funded space companies, and the Italian Space Agency has done a lot of work there. The UK has a fair number as well. France, Germany, as you'd expect with their technological.
Give it some perspective. If you took a combination of all the space companies from the countries that you just mentioned and added them up, would it be thousands?
Hundreds.
See, and that's where can we go back to that? Let's circle back to that point that we were talking about earlier. The fact that the United States has that, right? Like there's already the space economy barely exists. Like we're in the third pitch of the first inning, and we already have thousands of companies, which means there are hundreds of thousands of employees at these companies. Maybe 1 million people are working at private space companies, which gives a presence that then they got new space. This guy leaves and he starts it up and he hires the people and poaches from there. And then SpaceX's guy leaves that and he's got funding for this. And we've got all this already just burgeoning happening, but it's going to explode.
But understand the history. I mean, space has been a U.S. thing in terms of a public market perspective because of NASA being the lead dog and all these other Western countries supplying a component, like Canada, really big in robotics. They made their chops, with the robot arm, the Canada arm on the space station and the shuttle. But a lot of these other countries just made parts, and it would pop up here and there. When I mentioned all the space agencies, they're not building rockets. They're not putting up tons of satellites. They may design a satellite and the French may launch it, or we may launch it for them. SpaceX may launch it. These countries, the difference today is you can buy your way into the space economy if you're a small country. You look at, Azerbaijan and some of these other countries. They are aggressive as heck for space, and they can buy their way in. Gee, I've got a few $1 billion. I can buy a space station now. You couldn't buy one before because nobody was making them, just the governments. So you couldn't buy them. You can't buy a spacesuit today unless you buy it from NASA or China or Russia. There are no commercial spacesuits.
Okay? I found a couple of old Russian cosmonaut spacesuits on eBay.
Well, yeah, you can buy a couple of old Russian.
It's more expensive than you think, though. I thought it looked actually pretty cool. I found one, and it was not in bad condition. They want
eminent domain
$10,000.
Yeah, no.
But wouldn't that look great as a prop right back there, like a cosmonaut?
There you go.
An entire suit would be nice there.
Yeah. For when Skittles goes to the moon. too.
But
There you go.
man,
There we go.
Cabana Crypto with the sneaky scene-stealing humor here and there. All right, guys, we got like 5-10 more minutes. Let's hit on the last bits and wrap it up.
Yeah, just a couple of crypto-related questions. The first being, I guess, more of a technical, with all the recent concern over bad actors in crypto, hashtag FTX and others, many others. Has the SKTLs code been audited? Same question for the app where I can claim my rewards. How do we know if connecting our MetaMask wallets, I guess, is 100% safe?
Yeah. Look, number one, the audits in crypto are silly. Like they're meaningless. No, we haven't bothered doing that. I guess when we actually did launch, we had to do a couple of oddity type of things. But look, no, you can go look the code up on GitHub or wherever we publish it, and you can go to the SKTLs website and read the white paper. And we did it as openly and transparently. It's not even as possible. It's completely openly and transparent what we did. The code is out there. It is what it is. We've been mining the tokens once a month.
There's just an update, I guess, today or yesterday that the new rewards, I guess, were out.
And so you can go claim your new rewards if you own some tokens. I've done this question. I've done it many times where I go to the app.sktls.com website inside of the browser, inside of the MetaMask wallet. God, crypto's so complicated.
I mean, if it's, I guess, a read only,
let me
then
just finish it. Let me finish the saying. I've done it several times. The claiming of the tokens works on both. I've got a wallet that my main one and another one that I've tested with, and both of them at work every time. I can't vouch for MetaMask. I'll tell you frankly, I have butterflies. I don't have a lot of money in SKTLs, but I got enough that my wife would be pissed if it was gone. And when I open MetaMask, I'm nervous. There was one time, I don't know, 6 months after we'd launched, where on a Saturday morning, it was like, cannot find your token. And I was like, I'm not even going to worry about this. I'll look in a few hours. And if it's not there, then I'll text Daniel and Sanatzi. And shout out to all the volunteers. Thank you guys for having built. Daniel especially built the code that you can go read.
And often on the Wednesday calls. So
yeah.
Perhaps that would be a good question for him.
Yeah, I wish he were on this call. If you come on the Wednesday call tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, Daniel will probably be there, and he would be able to answer your question in a lot more detail than I just did. I'm nervous. Crypto's amazing, and Bitcoin's crazy that it works, and it's still here, and billions of dollars have been invested in mining it and figuring out how to build platforms on it and all this crap. It works somehow. I'm nervous about Binance. We built it on the Binance chain and the Binance Smart Chain. And that's where again, it's all transparent and the code works and all that. But Binance, I can't vouch for Binance. I don't know that CZ guy from Adam. I read his tweets like anybody else. I don't know. The MetaMask, it's amazing. It works every time, except for that 1 4-hour span when it didn't. But yeah, it is what it is. It's a SKTL crypto, and I believe in the concept that we built, and we did it in a virtuous, open, ethical manner, and that's all I can tell you.
There you go. And you possibly ask on the community call on Wednesday, like Cody was saying.
So what? Come back.
Last one. This is by Crypto Creatures. What is the plan for building a community to bring in real adoption of the SKTLs token, which is a timely question because this was a big topic in last week's.
I was about to say, Dan literally laid out an April. Did you guys hear Dan's, he's so modest when he's describing who he is. And so I was like, I ran a couple of Wall Street companies and stuff. This guy used to run some serious, he's trained. He knows everything about selling anything. And we were on, he writes this bullet point thing for us to be here's what you guys should do to build a community. And one of the neat things about it is you outline what we do and people are like, oh crap. Yeah, I want to be a part of cleaning up space debris. Dan, will you talk about some of the partnerships that we hope we're building? We've got some nascent partnerships. Maybe don't mention names, but like Space Force, we want to partner with Space Force, and we've got connections, and we're working them, and they've been on our SKTLs calls, and we're trying to partner with entities that are already trying to figure out how to fund cleaning up of space debris on that side. On this side, we're doing these calls like this. We need to do much more marketing. All of you people watching, we would love for you to help us build this community. Cabana Crypto, thank you for hosting this podcast. He's got a crypto following. No reason to be doing this except he believes in SKTLs too, you know. Dan, talk about it a little bit, please.
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, this notion I mentioned, Orbital Prime, which has all these companies competing to develop technology for debris remediation, and we introduced the concept to SpaceWorks of adding SKTLs to the award structure, or being able to provide SKTLs to the companies who come up with technology that's selected. We've talked about working with potentially with some universities or education level outreach to develop competition for kind of younger students to be able to submit ideas for debris remediation, kind of the feeder system to the startup community and for all of these other ideas. Anything to generate ideas and to find ideas we can then turn to SpaceWorks or to the Air Force Research Lab, which is connected very closely to SpaceWorks, especially in Albuquerque, to vet, to diligence some of these technologies to say, you know what, that's got some interesting characteristics, we should pursue that, and to encourage or support the further work on some of these ideas. But it's about stirring up at the grassroots level and surfacing as many potential breakthrough technologies as possible. That's what the new space economy is all about.
That's just it. Right now, we're building a page on the website that will allow students, companies, countries, universities to submit their ideas to the SKTLs community. And then, again, we're going to try to figure out the best way to put together maybe a team that can help vet some of those ideas that then the community can vote on with the decentralized autonomous organization on. Dan, I thanked Cabana. I want to give a formal, genuine thank you to you. I have genuinely enjoyed building a friendship with you. I am excited about just everything we work on, but genuinely, you being here on this call, it's an honor to have had you here. I assume you'll be on most, like maybe the call. Dan's there almost every Wednesday at 4 p.m. And he really does just sometimes end up accidentally riffing on some really interesting tidbits about, like, SpaceX did this launch yesterday that did this. And you guys didn't know this, but it was that. And it's cool stuff, So Dan, genuinely, thanks for being here today. I appreciate your presence in SKTLs in general.
My pleasure.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, and not just crypto talk, but tons of space knowledge in this. So thank you, Dan. This is outstanding. I guess we're gonna wrap it now. So what do we close with? We had just reminders. We have the 4 p.m. again every Wednesday. Check the SKTLs Twitter. The link's posted there. Actually, it will be posted there now that we're going to do a live stream of it.
We'll put it on SKTLS.com every week beforehand. If you don't mind, Cabana, just start emailing, that link as soon as you print it every week, and we'll get it on the website and in the Twitter feed. And obviously, you guys subscribe to the SKTLs, SKTLS.com. Go there and subscribe to the daily newsletter. It'll get to your email. And for example, today's newsletter had the link front and center.
Yep. All the websites and socials, they're all in the description below for this video. And you can just check them all out. So cool. Once again, thank you, Mr. Cody Willard, Dan Geraci, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
This is what's beautiful about the decentralized autonomous organization. We're all like thanking each other because we all are just like, I want to be a part of that. I'll be a part of that. Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. God bless, guys. Thanks.
Thank us.